Hi again. So today I wanted to talk about the fact that I have a really good relationship going and I am fucking it up because I would say largely because of complex PTSD due to my experience with narcissists and their abuse. Um, and it's just been really hard to get out of. And again, you think you're sort of better than you are, and then you start to do relationship stuff and you just freak out a lot. And then your person wonders why and starts getting irritated at you because, of course, they do. So I wanted to talk about sort of complex PTSD and this like self-sabotaging aspect, and sort of why that might be, because I think that I am doing that a little bit with this current one, which is the best relationship ever, but like I just can't hang. Um, so this happens because you are trying to avoid the extreme pain that you felt before during trauma, right? So that trauma is still trapped in you, maybe even on like a cellular level. And so your body puts walls in place to try to keep those feelings from being felt again. And these walls can show up as things like being totally numb, concentrating on people pleasing, being by yourself a lot on purpose, perfectionism, and then ultimately depression, anxiety, insomnia, and even paranoia about things. Surprise, surprise. So after narcissistic abuse, too, sort of a common step in the trying to heal process is just wondering what's wrong with you, wondering if you're making everything up or whether these things that you're feeling are valid. Can you trust your feelings, which is really hard because with complex PTSD, I don't want to say you can't trust your feelings, but one of the main symptoms is like having feelings sort of disproportionately strong to the actual situation. So it's kind of hard to figure things out. But the goal during the healing process is kind of to try to see yourself as someone who is trying very hard and is still suffering, and also not to hate these defense mechanisms that pop up and make you act in crazy ways in relationships because they are kind of trying to, right? Like they make you look crazy, but the intention is to protect you so that you never have to feel the way you did during trauma again. So, of course, there are lots of kinds of therapy with real therapists to really try to get at the root of your trauma so that you can truly heal from this. But I am not an expert on any of those. If you have access to therapy, of course, do it. That's great. I wanted to talk more today about sort of my experience struggling with my thoughts and actions because of CPTSD. See if you've had any similar ones or if you can share other ones. And I think mine are pretty textbook. Like you can look at a lot of the symptoms of CPTSD and be like, oh, that's why I did that. Okay. And it's kind of comforting because, again, then you can just think about the whys and sort of try to get away from those things in the future. And maybe I'm not just purely crazy. There's a reason for this. I'm going to try to think more about it and not act in these ways. And it's interesting because when I think about like my major triggers or things that have ended with me acting like a psycho, I can think about it for a couple minutes and link it directly back to an experience with one of my narcissists. So like they do make sense, which is good too, right? We can think through it again and try not to do it. So the first thing is something I was struggling with just this weekend. This kind of idea of self-sabotage, which is something that often happens with people with complex PTSD. And you do it kind of in order to be in control of the situation, right? So, for example, this obviously is like a misguided way to protect ourselves, but I just found out sort of that my partner, who's in the Air Force Reserves, like may or may not be sort of getting ready to get deployed because of our current political situation and major conflicts that may or may not be happening. So they scheduled her to get a bunch more training in the near future, and then, she could be ready to deploy. So that's like fucking terrifying. Like if you've been with a narcissist before for just a plethora of reasons, having your partner in like, let's say North Korea or whatever is just horrifying. So then my reflex was just run away, just fucking run away. Even though you like want to marry this person, you need to get away from this extreme potential for a lot of pain. What would the pain be? Finding someone else who is not only physically closer to her, like in the same country, deployed with her, more convenient, in that sort of situation where like everything is heightened because, you're in a new place and like maybe it's a war zone and like you're all kind of stuck in the same shit situation. So you like bond really easily. And I have never experienced anyone staying with me through any sort of distance, or if there has been anyone else remotely interesting around. And of course, with a narcissist, it always feels like there are way more people who could be interesting, even though it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with how much attention they would give the narcissist, right? Because they'll take it from anybody. So, and I've never seen anyone say no to attention. So, like, this isn't a real concern. Like, the chances of her finding someone that she, clicks with better over there, better than me, are, like, not very high. And, like, she is a trustworthy person. And I don't think she would just, like, get drunk and hook up with someone because she's lonely over there. But again, I can look back at many situations with narcissists and see, oh, you got lonely for a second, or even just like we had a fight, you hopped right back on that dating site, you went back to your ex, whatever it is. And then the distance thing makes me so nervous. I'm just realizing this now, partially too, because with a narcissist, you don't actually have an emotional connection, right? Because they don't give a shit about you. So if you're not right there in front of them, supplying them with supply and attention and praising them and whatever, they're just going to find someone else to do it. So that, I think, is another huge part of that. Like, how could you possibly want to stay with me? What would be left if I couldn't see you for 6 months? Like, this is just going to die. And I would rather leave you now than see it, slowly and painfully disappear while you like hide from me the fact that you found someone else over there because you think it's fun to have two of us. You know how these people work. And again, the part about like doing something really intense with a group of people, like I realized that was directly linked to my ex, who was in Teach for America, and of course that's a really intense schedule. It's a really tough job, and so they would have these 12-hour days where, you're with, like, the same people teaching, getting through really hard stuff, and it's really emotional, and so you form really strong connections with them, and you often end up hooking up with them, which is exactly what happened with mine. Well, I was sitting at home trying to be like, oh, how are we going to keep this relationship alive when I don't get to see you a lot? Trying to like send videos or like do little cute things at home. And then of course you just feel like such an idiot. So I think, feeling like that and imagining, being in another country, like forming any part of my life around trying to make that work and then possibly just feeling stupid because she's like hooking up with someone else. That's really the root of it. Even though I don't think that would happen, it just triggers, man. Triggers. And then this also has sort of fueled my extreme fear, sort of, that, she's a police officer too. So maybe you just want to date a cop because, they understand you. Again, this fear of like, you have this bond because you do this really intense job and, I'm never really going to understand it. And how could you possibly be in a car with someone for 8 hours and talk about intense things and whatever and like not fuck them, right? Like that, it's actually pretty easy to not fuck somebody in a car after 8 hours, but not my exes. That for sure would have been like a great opportunity to like feel out, you know, who could be a good source of supply and just use it all day. So that has been like really fucking with me, and I need to just keep thinking about the reasons that I feel this way and what it's truly connected to, and not always being in this like heightened sense of dread about both of her job situations, because we can't live that way. So another thing that's been getting to me, aside from the sort of the desire to self-sabotage in this weird way, is the experiencing emotions stronger than the ones appropriate for the current situation, because you're applying the same intensity that was needed in your previous traumatic situation to the current situation, which is not the same. We don't need it anymore. We don't need the crazy armor that pops up and the fight or flight. Mine is still really bad, and I actually do both. I don't even pick one. I do both. I also freeze sometimes. I will freeze, I will fight, and then you see the flight. I'll just go for it. And it's really bad, and I need to like figure out how to rein it in. So it's also hard because, again, it's not that I'm always wrong that something is messed up or that someone is like kind of being manipulative in a situation with my partner. But it probably doesn't call for like dissociating and getting blurry vision and like getting the extreme anxiety that makes my heart race and makes me like hot all the way through my face and like ears, and the extreme need to just cut ties and get out of the situation. So again, you know, there have been a lot of kind of littler things like, why is your ex's brother texting you? Even just to say Merry Christmas. I mean, I do think that's weird. Again, like I'm not always totally wrong, but again, like it doesn't call for this extreme worry and fight or flight and sort of huge trigger reaction. So I need to work on that too. Another thing, of course, a huge symptom of complex PTSD is having a lot of trouble trusting and then always thinking about the probably bad motives of other people. So, of course, this comes from seeing how your narcissist would never do anything that wasn't self-serving, and that's the motivation for everything they do. So then, again, it's really hard when I see people interacting with my partner and I'm like, I know that you're a really nice person and you're accommodating and you want to help people like genuinely, and I know what they're doing and I don't think you are going to see it because you don't think in the fucked up way that I do. And again, I'm not always wrong, but also I kind of need to sometimes just like let it happen if it's going to, and like trust that she would handle it if it got out of control. So one of these current situations is this new Air Force friend that she has that I guess is like a really new person who like just got done with basic training, but since she's been in the Air Force for a while, she's kind of like a mentor to like certain new people who come in. I didn't know this, so when she got a text from this lady saying something about like graduation is in a couple of days or something from basic training, I was like, who cares? And like she mentioned the text to me. It wasn't like I like dug through her phone, but she was like, oh, that's weird. Why does she have her phone during basic training? And sort of brought it up. And I was like, who is texting you? Why are they so excited to tell you that? Like, if you know someone well enough to be getting a text from them about graduation, then you should be like family or a close friend, right? Or like, how long have you known her? How long have you been texting her? Why haven't you mentioned her until like months of talking to her? Why are you Snapchatting? And like, again, like I am from the generation of Facebook, not so much Snapchat. I think Snapchat is stupid. And it also is associated in my mind with like sneaky things. And she's like, no, like we talk about Air Force stuff. what could you be Snapchatting about with like advice about how to get acclimated to the Air Force? This is where my brain goes, right? And I think like for younger people, it turns out this person is like not even old enough to drink. So like, yeah, Snapchat is like a perfectly normal way of communicating. But I just immediately was like, all of this is weird, and I don't understand why she's like obsessed with you if she's like sending you all this stuff. And it's weird. And then, I actually saw her because I was on their base last night, and I was like, oh, she's also like super gay, which is fine. But again, the thing that was mentioned to me was she has a boyfriend. Well, she does, but like, this is going to sound weird. But, there are certain times when you can just tell, like, somebody hasn't quite figured themselves out yet. And so I was like, oh, I was right. That's why she's drawn to you. Maybe it's perfectly innocent. Maybe she just does want advice. But, like, also, there might be a little, like, crush obsession going on, and you don't see it. And it bothers me. And I take it, I, like, react way too strongly to stuff like that. And like, why are you putting your foot on her chair while we're at this bar talking? I don't know. Because it always could be, right? Because I've seen everything bad happen. Like, nothing would shock me. Nothing. And so that's really hard when you try to do the thing during a trigger where you're like, this is not the past. This is a different situation. You are not in danger. But I could be, because I've seen worse. Right? Oh, it's the hardest fight in there. And so the next one is definitely related. Catastrophizing, right? Everything that happens, you jump to the worst possible conclusion and you assume that it's definitely true and it will definitely never change or get better. Another one of these recent situations with my partner was, again, she's a cop, and they had like a holiday party sort of thing. And she sort of said like, well, of course you're invited, but it costs too much money and it's going to be boring and we're just going to talk about cop stuff. So I'm just going to go for a little bit and, relax at home. I'll be right back. This maybe should be normal, but I've never experienced cop related anything. And at all of my work holiday parties, your partner, of course, is invited. And, it would be weird to just go for like a minute because we all actually like each other. Anyway, so then my fucked up catastrophizing brain goes, what are you going to talk about that you don't want me to hear? Who don't you want me to see? Who don't you want to see me? Are you embarrassed of me? Is there something about your job situation that you want to change that, you don't want to tell me about yet, but you're going to talk about it with you? I don't know. So that was bad. And I definitely like didn't control it very well. And I go into this spiral of like needing to ask and ask and ask again. Like, why did you say that? Why did you say this at first, but then you said this? You said I was invited, but then you were like, no, it's too expensive. Maybe you were just trying to be accommodating. But in my head, I'm like, what's going on? Right? And then the like, it's never going to get better part is like, oh my God, why do you have work parties where partners aren't invited? Like, it's really important that your friends, if you're going to end up close to these people, it's important that your friends and your community members like support our relationship, especially with a cop where like their schedule is kind of awful and like it's hard enough without having, a community of people who sort of like don't get along with their partners. There's a lot of divorce in cop relationships, and she's mentioned before that people have said to her like, oh, you'll love working afternoons where you like never see your person because like, yeah, I only have to see my wife once a week, and I'm like, I don't love that environment. And like, I just really hope that in the future, I could actually be at a party and have a good time and be like respected instead of feeling like a burden in that environment. So it's all fine, but that's just an example of like how my brain is like downward spiral like so fast. So those are just a few examples, but if you are struggling with kind of doing some things that might be messing with a good relationship with a good person, like I am, there are some tips that I stole from everydayfeminism.com, which I love. Tips for your partner, actually, if they, well, hopefully they are willing to think about these things and kind of at least be patient with you a little while you work through these things. So the first one is to tell them that we don't always know our triggers. So, a lot of people when they're trying to be supportive, they ask, well, okay, what are your triggers, so that I can like not do them. That's awesome. But if we don't know, another question is, what should I do if you find yourself surprisingly triggered by something that you didn't see coming, right? So maybe think about that for yourself too. What do you need from someone? Is it don't touch me, or is it like touch my shoulder? A million different versions of things, like whatever works for you, like let your partner know. I need to do this too. Another thing is to encourage us to express our grief and anger surrounding the trauma that happened before, because we tend to bottle it up because previously with a narcissist, we weren't allowed to feel anything. It wasn't valid, or we were lying, or it was our own fault. So they can, ask if you want them to like stay and listen, or if you want to cry by yourself or with them. Do you want to talk it out? But it can be really therapeutic to just like get that out. Another one then is letting us vent without trying to fix anything. Because again, this just makes you feel heard in the ways that you couldn't before around your narcissist, because your feelings didn't matter. So even just having someone listen to them and, not interject and not dispute them can be really helpful. Another one is to give us permission to be imperfect. This one is so hard for me because I don't give myself permission to be that ever. And when I am any kind of imperfect, I worry a lot, which is also probably why I'm making this video, because I'm like, I'm fucking up. I'm going to be not lovable like very soon. Many of us, I think, after this type of narcissistic abuse, especially, try to be perfect so that you can earn love from people who should be loving us for just who we are as imperfect humans. So often, like, the inner critic voice is really bad. I think I've been doing this since forever, probably from childhood, but I've always had to like be the valedictorian, and I had an eating disorder that still pops up every once in a while, because like, who could love you if you don't look perfect? I still do it in my all kinds of relationships, like at work. If I'm not perfect, I like have a horrible day and I feel guilty and I think they're gonna fire me, all these anxious thoughts. How could somebody like to work with me if I did this one thing that I didn't understand? I do it even with my roller derby team. I decided that I couldn't quite commit to trying out for the travel team because it's such a time commitment and financial too. And I'm still worried about how mad they're going to be at me, because they'll want me to get better for next season, but I'm not doing it. So I'm not perfect. I just have no idea how anyone could love me if I'm not constantly very impressive. So there were actually some suggestions of things that people could say. The troubling thing is that I read them and immediately was like, this is bullshit. If somebody said this to me, I would think they were bullshitting me. Just another problem from narcissism abuse. But so one of them is, somebody could say, you don't have to be perfect for me or for anyone else. Like, I'm going to be in your corner no matter what. Sounds like bullshit. But, maybe if someone says it often enough, it would sink in. Another thing someone could say is, it's true that you make mistakes, but you always work hard to make things right afterwards, right? And that's the important part. Another thing is, in my eyes, you're already lovable and already worthy. I don't know what these things mean, but, your partner could try it. It's so hard to believe them. And they could also say, if something's wrong, I'm going to tell you, and then I promise that we'll work through it. Woo! Hard to believe. But yeah, those are some things they could try. And then the last thing that you could do is do for your partner who's trying to support you is, of course, to just offer them some CPTSD resources specifically that, resonate with you. And like maybe the symptoms that you're having that tend to pop up more than others. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm wondering what you have that you maybe know is linked to PTSD and you're just like really struggling to break that pattern. You can tell us all in the comments. And yeah, maybe we can just sort of talk it out a little more and know that we're not alone in sometimes feeling crazy and awful and just trying to make new patterns and live happily and make sure we don't ruin our actually really good relationships in the process. So thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.